18 OE, Orient Express. I've played monster games, play a lot of XX games, a lot of train games and everything. I think this is the first monster train game I've attempted, and it truly is that. I mean, you look at it and say, well, that board's a lot bigger than your normal XX board. Yeah, and the hexes are a lot smaller. This is, you know, not quite standard wargame hexes, but pretty damn tiny. I haven't even popped out. Here are the track tiles, you can see. They're tiny. Okay. This is part of why I played my 18EU, which is hiding in the 18 Nebraska box there, was because they're essentially the same topic, but this one's on a monster scale. And there's actually some similarities in the play, which, you know, if you maybe weren't an 18XX aficionado, you would say, hey, that makes sense. You know, they're covering the same topic. They should be similar. Yeah, but it seems to be a derivation involved here in a way that I wouldn't have expected necessarily. All right. What do we have? Well, to begin with, we have a 50-page rule book, and then another big, thick playbook. Bunch of really, it comes with fantastic components. A bunch of really heavy. It's not just cardstock. This is cardboard. Not certificates. I mean, they sort of are, but they're the mats where you put corporate stuff. By the way, this will not be an introduction to 18XX at all. There's no time for that. Bunches and bunches of tiles. All told, there's over 1,000 pieces in this. Many of them these wooden pieces. And these are track rights. A bunch of charts and tables, copies of this main table, 4 of them. Copies of the special abilities of the different railroads. That's kind of helpful little thing. That's a cheat sheet that I'd like to make for most games. This is an upgrade chart. You have, yeah, here's the game phases. This is not a simple one, but on the other side of the tables you have all the track upgrade charts. So you have a lot of resources available for the players. This one should actually be on the table. They suggest it's the easiest way of seeing which tiles are out, but I haven't popped my tiles yet, so we'll get to that. Tons of trains. The 2 trains are tilted sideways. There's, I think, 30 of them in total. They're not all there. That's why they're tilted sideways. Some of them are included over here. This is the initial offering for this game. It's going to be using a kind of bastardized hybrid version, somewhere between 1835 and the 1830 packets, where you have your choice of anything off here, but you can bid on stuff that's below it. And that's actually kind of a best of both worlds in my view. I always felt like 35 was just so restrictive. But there was something kind of nice about it. Hey, here are a couple that are about the same. You can have one of these, or you can go to the next layer. Unfortunately, the 35 packet has some real imbalances in it. And it ends up being, because of no auction, almost a fixed book of what happens. Yeah, you take this one, you know, because it's the better of the 2. Now the next player's stuck with a choice of 2 rails, and it just almost ends up pre-programmed who gets what, at least once you've played it a little bit. All along here are the company shares. Now, companies are weird. There's a lot of them here, and they don't all make it through the beginning of play. They have a couple of tokens, one for their par value, one for their stock value. That's the whole stock chart there. They start out as regional companies, which are 50%, which are 25% shares essentially. But they can be upgraded into national companies if you include, I believe it's a minor. If you merge them with a minor, then you get this capability to, like, turn them into a national, not a national, a major company. You'll also have the opportunity to turn your major companies into national companies, and it's a similar circumstance to the sort of feeling that a lot of the games that have nationalized rails have, which is that, oh look, I can't afford the trains, let me dump my company into the national. Except here, every one of these has the opportunity to become a national and operate kind of on its own. This is kind of weird, actually, because if you look at like the Belgian national, it flips over and becomes the French National Railway. Well, there are multiple pieces of the French National Railway, but they don't all merge together. They just operate separately. I think probably the initial design had thoughts of merging them all together, but then decided, hey, you know, you can run them as separate pieces if you like. The more national railways, okay, national railways are kind of weird because they're going to be able to use obsolete trains. We saw that kind of behavior recently in, what was it, 1854 has that, where you can keep using obsolete trains. Maybe 44 does as well, I don't remember. I forget so easily. Then you have this big old stock chart here. Pretty standard stock chart. Par values are split between regional and major. When a regional jumps up to be a major, its par value increases. You know, what does that mean? Well, that's an interesting question. And then, what do we have? We have, looks like a pretty simple stock chart. Some information here. We have some interesting little stuff here. These port authorities. Grand Orient Express. So the Orient Express is when you make a run that qualifies as an Orient Express run from one of the major metropolises, I think, to Constantinople up here, you get one of those tokens. You get some benefits off of it, and the token is kind of, this is like a bell ringer run in 1870. You get a bonus off of it. It's not like the bell ringer in terms of the bonus that you get, and then you can never take it again, so you want to mark that you have it. These are replacements to mark places on the map that have certain symbols on them that you want to retain through the different track upgrades. That's a really awesome feature or design implementation, whatever, is this idea of, you know, there's stuff printed on the map that's important and we need to bubble it up so that you can see it, you know, as the track gets upgraded and you don't have to try to remember what's on there. I really appreciate them doing that. The port authorities, well, one of the things in this game is you're going to be able to transfer your rails across seas as well. And some of it's through these ferries, but you're also able to just load up on a steamer and sail across the water. It can cut into your revenue, but it can make the Orient Express route possible. For example, it can make certain connections on a shorter situation a little bit more possible. Tiny, tiny little money. Now, the game designers more or less have said, hey, you should use chips. Well, that little money is going to take up less room than normal poker chips would. I've seen games played with the normal poker chips, and I got to tell you, they're kind of overwhelming. Tiny poker chips are somewhat less annoying. But that tiny money may work out well, it may not. They put in a whole lot of money, and the bank is huge in this game. I think the bank is $54,000 pounds, and there's an excess of like 16,000 pounds in it. You have options in configuration. I went in favor of putting as many small bills out as possible because I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm a little worried about table space here. I may have to drop down to that table or add another table to my room, but kind of loath to do that because there's little enough walking room. But we'll see. We'll see, but I suspect this isn't enough space. The game holds 6 players. What else do we have? The stick or wand is my own. Yeah, I got a wand and a crystal. Pretty soon I'm going to have my Athame here. And actually, that's long gone. Someone stole it, as is my staff. Oh, terrible. Okay. And no, I'm not a Wiccan or anything. I'm just, you know, a magus. So let's, I guess, start digging into the rules. Now, luckily for us, there's basically nothing on the game in this little corner of the map. So we'll use that. I don't like to be right under the lamp. It burns me when I bang my shoulder into it. You'll see that these are starting locations of all these regional companies. That's just to give you an idea of where everything is, and so you don't have to be looking up and trying to figure out where the hell something actually is. Those should all be gone fairly soon in the game, from what I understand. Again, this is going to be really an exploration game, and I'm sure I'll get a lot wrong, so don't expect when I play it, or even necessarily when I read the rules, to be particularly helpful to you. However, at least you'll get a view of it and hear some of my babbling and cursing. Okay. There's some interesting track in this too. Haven't explained these suckers. These tiles are special bonuses that show up on the board, and I haven't set them up yet, that are going to be, if you're the first person to lay track into that location, you're going to get a benefit from it. Whatever company is doing so gets kind of a bonus, a cash payout for that. All these guys have all the information on them. These are the miners. They have all the information you need on them, on the front of them, or at least a lot of it, about what their special abilities are. But these also have special abilities, and like most privates, they don't have it spelled out on them. You're going to have to look. Now, luckily for you, or me, there is a summary of all that, so you don't have to pay. Everybody doesn't have to be waiting for the rule book to try to get that information. The setup, so I've incorporated some errata, but here I'm actually, this is not errata, this is something that should be errata. Spelling out how much cash they gave you in the box. They don't tell you that, they just tell you how much to set up for the game. So I had to count all that money to figure out what the fuck I actually had and how much I needed to remove to play. All right, you randomize player order. Priority goes to one of the players. Everybody's going to start with money divided, a certain starting amount of money divided among the players as evenly as possible. Well, rounding upwards in some cases. So normally you'll play with $5,400. If you're playing without this concession packet here, which can complicate the game a little bit, you give them a little less money, only $5,200 to split amongst them. Now, 6 players, $5,400, that sounds like $900 each. That's a lot of money, right? But you've got a lot of companies, and they all kind of have to start. Your share limit, okay. So for a regional, it's 100%. You're allowed to hold 100% of the company. You have a certificate limit as well, which we haven't, did I just gloss over that? Yeah. The certificate limit's printed over here based on the number of players. And again, huge numbers. This is why I say I don't have enough space on this table, you know, on these two tables. That's, you know, in 6 players, oh, it holds 7. In 6 players, we have a 24 certificate limit. Well, that's at least 50% bigger than any other game I've seen, and probably a little heavier. And there's a lot of little companies that are going to be out and everything, and I just don't see how I'm going to have space. Privates and minors do count against your certificate limit. That's a little different from EU, as do all the certificates in regional, major, and national companies. When you exercise a private, you flip it over and it says closed. It'll no longer count against your certificate limit. That may remain in your possession because it indicates that there's some residual effect that you have to keep track of who had that private for at least part of the game still. If you end up over the initial the limit, you have to fix it. I'm not quite sure how you can do that, but when a presidency is stolen from you perhaps or something. And then you have to reduce it. You're allowed to close a private to clean up certificate limit. You're allowed to abandon a minor to do this as well. Those sound like bad ideas. Certainly early in the game, I don't think we're going to have certificate limit problems, but we'll see. Okay. In addition, you have share limits per company, which, as I said, is 100% in the regionals. In the majors or nationals, it's still 100%, but you may not be able to buy more than 60%. And we'll get to the limits on that in a bit. When a major floats, its share market is put over on the par value. Yeah. So these rules are really, really explicit. More explicit than most XX games, and more complete and better cross-referenced and everything, which I think is absolutely vital given the size of the rule book, but it's also kind of tedious to work your way through. Okay, for share market movement, and it's also the fact that, you know, I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything really important here, but I should probably gloss a little bit faster. Okay, markets move up a square on the share value track when you're sold out at the end of a stock round. They move down. Okay. If you're already in the top, and this is different from any other game I've seen, you shift to the right following these arrows. I've never seen one that does that. I've seen them shift you to the right and diagonal, so you keep the same stock price but get room to move up a row. Whenever you sell, each share sold of the company will drop at one square, a la 1830. When you pay out, okay, so this is an 18 EU flavored thing. When you pay out, if you pay more than the value of the stock value in your run, it doesn't matter if you're swallowing, half swallowing. Well, it doesn't matter if you're half swallowing or paying out full. The marker will move one space to the right. If you pay out 0, i.e. you swallow or don't have a train or something, you move a space to the left. And if you pay out some positive value but not equal to the share value of the company, you end up staying still. All right, the concept of game phases. This is not train phases. I'm going to take a little break before I go into this. Game phases, and there are still train phases. First is the auction railroad phase, where you auction off the packet. Okay, this to some extent gets rid of that first operating round or first stock round special rules and first operating round special rules and stuff, because most of these are front-ended and take place early in the game. So first you handle the auction, then you go to a concession railroad phase where you're allowed to use these to get a jump on floating companies earlier than through the normal process. We'll see how that works in a moment. Then after you've gotten through the concessions, the regional and minor railways get to move. And they have because they don't have a stock value, they have their own placement on here in terms of where they go in the order. And this is a little funky. I don't think it ever moves. It's kind of like, you know, the miners in 1835 or a number of other games. Oh, hey, they operate in order 1 through 6 or whatever. Well, here they operate in the order that they're floated, which is more player determined, but they'll stay in that order for the game, more or less. Yeah, more or less. Okay. So they will get a period in which they can keep running until enough of the miners are floated. Okay? Once you've gotten, okay, first all of the regional, I'm sorry, all of the miners and 18 of the 24 regional companies all have to be floated, operating, whatever, in order to get out of this phase. So there's a significant period of the game in which you're still going to have stock rounds and operating rounds and all that. It's just, you're not going to be going, I don't think you're going to be using major railways at this point. You're able to build that initial track and everything. And once enough money is made and enough of these miners are out, then you can start playing a bigger game, which is the major railroad phase. The major railroad phase is essentially what we're used to in an 18xx game, as all the stock operating round, operations outside of maybe the first stock, well, almost certainly the first stock round, but at the very least the auction part of the first stock round. But if you don't count the auction part, sometimes first stock round has some special rules. Well, this is all covered in here. Okay, at some point during the major railroad phase, the first phase 5 train happens and you enter this consolidation railroad phase, which is a point during which all the miners and regionals have to leave the game. All the privates and majors and shares of majors of nationals will remain. And this is going to normally be a normal stock round, and this kind of thing is often covered with, oh, all privates close or something like that, or, oh, we have a special merger rule. And here instead they've decided to use this format to express this. And that's really all you have. It's just an attempt to make a clearer rule set. Okay, so for the train phases, they're pretty standard. Train phase 1, now this has gotten, I've had trouble getting used to this, but I started seeing it back when I started playing 1854. Train phase 1 is the, oh look, we're playing and we don't have trains yet. And this is the concession railroad phase. Train phase 2 is when the first operating round actually begins. It allows you to build yellow track. Regionals and minors have 2 trains each. Majors are allowed to hold 4 trains. And all you can build is level 2 trains. Well, the trains in this game are a little funky. I should have gone over this when I went and looked at items. But basically you have, what is this like? This is like 2038. Which isn't a train game, so I can slip that one in, right? So the expensive version of the train is this 3+3, which allows you to visit 3 cities and 3 doinkers. But there's a cheaper version if you're in a rich area where you don't have to worry about doinkers. This isn't quite as limiting as hex trains, and, you know, especially with those little trains, getting a couple extra doinkers doesn't always do you very much. You can avoid building to the doinkers. Everybody starts out though, there isn't 2 choices with the 2 trains. The 2s are all 2+2s. That's what you're stuck with. Wow, they're kind of cheap. And some of them have different information on them. Some of them have other trains on the back that I don't think we need. I think I've counted out the correct number of trains, but I have to make sure. The thing I'm most worried about is actually the Pullmans. There are optional trains added to the game, And this is one way that they handled the component issues, is to backprint them there. Okay. Train phase 3 is the purchase of the first 3 train. Hey, it's got green track. Regional minors, still 2 trains. Majors, still 4. Minors are allowed to merge with majors during a stock round. Now, in order to create a major, you have to take a regional and turn it into the major. But once that's done, you're also allowed to take these minors and incorporate them into the major company. And then the major company gets some of the advantages that the minor provides. Maybe. First 4 train, all the level 2 trains go obsolete, but they can later be claimed by nationals. Majors that choose to convert, and you mark these, and this is kind of clever, or necessary. You mark these by turning the rusted trains sideways, just to indicate that, hey, you know, these are only available to certain places. You can use yellow and green track. I think you can use yellow and green back in the 3s. I seem to remember having said that. But, regionals and minors go down to 1 train. Majors are down to 3. Nationals can hold 4. Minors can now merge with majors and nationals. Now, the idea of nationals is kind of interesting. Whenever you have a train which rusts other trains, I haven't talked about all the trains. Whenever you have a train which rusts other trains, that's the one moment where you can create a national. Basically what you do is you're like, oh, I'm screwed. Come bail me out. And the national government will come in and bail you out. You still hold shares in the company, but it operates differently, significantly differently. It's not like the consolidation major railways that you see in some other games. Now, when we get up to the bigger trains, the 7 and 8, they come out as 4D and 5D. So you have 2 choices. You can either buy the cheaper 7+7, which is great if you're trying to make some long distance runs, perhaps. But if you've got a nice rich little run, this one is just a 4 train, but it doubles its revenue. So that can be pretty powerful. And then the 8+8 has a 5 train on the back of it, which is only $1,000. Hey, the trains are pretty cheap here. Yeah, I mean, all told, I'm used to $1,200 top line 8 trains that aren't as good. I mean, you've got to admit, an 8+8 is better than an 8 train. It's not better than a diesel, but the 5D may be better than anything you can see in most games. You had brown track in, what, phase 5 as usual. That drops the majors to, well, they still can hold 3 trains. 6 train comes out, the majors drop down to 2 trains. And you're still brown track, there's no gray yet. The 3s rust, nationals conform. First 7 train, you get the gray track. Majors can only hold 2 trains at this point. Nationals can only hold 3. And level 8 trains become available for purchase after the first 4 of the 7s have been bought. And there's a card in there to help remind you of that. And now this is the final opportunity for nationals to form. Nationals are a nice sort of steam valve in this game, from what I can see, which is to say that, you know, hey, I've been running too hard. Well, okay, I'll turn it into a national. And nationals aren't a bad thing in terms of the revenue they bring in, but they're never going to reach the kind of revenue that the huge runs late in the game do. However, the way the game works, it's quite possible you may not reach the end of the game. At least that's the impression I get from the rules. We'll see. We'll see how likely that is, but I have the feeling that you kind of have to push the trains to get them out in this, and that'll cost you. And there's some interesting trade-offs here, because we'll get to it. If the game breaks before a certain point, if the bank breaks before a certain point, the game is going to end with the bank breaking. If it doesn't, then it's a certain number of rounds after the big train is bought. So that's, and I think that's the delimiting line, is the 8 plus 8. If that doesn't come, if an 8 train doesn't come out, the game will break by bank breaking. Otherwise, it has a time limit break that's triggered as soon as you buy that first train. Okay, let us take a rest because we're tired. Okay, I've already kind of explained. Sorry, I'm physically not in great shape. The opening packet. Each private, yeah. Okay. Privates will stay open until the end of the game, at which point they have their face value. Or if the owner exercises its special ability, as soon as you do this, it'll generally remove the private from the game. In some cases, you might have to keep a face-down version of it to remember whose it was. Or you can just flip it face down during a stock round, and then the private doesn't count towards your certificate limit, but you still get to exercise its special ability. You just don't get the revenue from it. Basically, a way out of certificate limits there. Miners are going to be railroads. They have a face value of 120 each. They're going to split it 50-50. And they're going to have 2 tokens that they can use on the board. The second token costs 20 bucks. The first token is going to be based on the track rights card that they use. Now these miners are not actually linked to a nationality. Some of them seem like they might be. When you see something like Krasnaya Strela, you assume, hey, that's probably Russian, or, well, it's probably the only choice for a Slavic country that has that opportunity. But you select one of the track right counters when you buy the miner, I believe. And that track right counter, or when you float the miner, that track right counter has a cost, I think this is the cost for the second token. I don't know what this is. Oh, this is a reduction in cost within that region, which is kind of a neat bonus that some of the track rights give. It's only certain nations, so like Russia gives that. The miners each have their own special abilities. The concessions, like I said, they're going to give you a right to float a company a little ahead of time. And floating is a little different in this game. Okay, so the game starts off with an auction railroad phase, in which players are allowed to buy from the charter. When it's your turn in the phase, you can either purchase an item from the top row at its value, or put a bid on any item below, which has to be at least $5 more than its face value. And these guys have a face value as well, and you can see the first one has a higher face value than these guys, where you could get away with a $5 bid to guarantee yourself, well, to get yourself in on the bidding on that concession. It probably gives you one, but oh no, it has to be, you have to bid face value and at least £5 above any bid previously placed by another player. So you can just bid face value on something and you might just get it. Interesting. You set aside that money as you would in an 1830 auction. Now, when a row is cleared, any items that were bid on the next row enter into an 1830 style auction on them. And that doesn't move the priority deal or anything. And if there's anything left in that row, then players are allowed the players take up their normal actions in the auction, either buying one of the top row items or putting another bid or a bid on the lower row. When the last item in the opening packet is sold, the auction railroad is complete and will go into train phase 1 and the concession railroad phase, which both will begin at the same time. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing. If players consecutively pass before the entire opening packet is sold, all the purchased privates pay their dividends out. The miners don't get to run, and you don't get to use any concessions or anything, although I think if you get into the concessions, you're probably at a point where everything will have sold out. All items on the topmost row are reduced in cost by £5. Now, is that the topmost current row? That's how I'm reading it. Of course, most XX games would have just said, hey, the first item, which would kind of correspond to the topmost row of the packet. Which is why I have some trepidation about reading it how it most clearly is written. However, this game does seem to almost, although I would never suggest it, almost be written, the rules are written for someone who's never played an XX game before, which is okay. When a miner is purchased, you pay its cash, the cash that you bid on it or paid for it, into the treasury. If you paid over 180 on a bid, though, only 180 goes into the treasury. If you're ending up buying a miner at face value during, just because it's been exposed or whatever, rather than dropping a bid on it, you can pay any amount you like, more than the face value, just to get extra cash into it to give you a shot at getting a 3 train at some point. This will start an auction on that miner, and anyone's allowed to bid in it, which is kind of an interesting little fill-up. Let's talk about train phase 1. So as soon as the auction is completed, and that may take several rounds of auctioning, as we mentioned, where people are making money and prices are reduced, and that might be necessary. We have a lot of money to begin with. Probably enough to buy that entire packet, because it was a lot of money. But we'll have to see. Then we enter train phase 1, and whoever has the first concession is going to get to use their concession. Fucking annoying little dogs here. Once all 10 concessions have been executed in numerical order, the regional miner railroad phase begins, and that'll start with a stock round, and the priority deal goes to the card holder, or card holder gets the first action. Train phase 1 may or may not include all of the regional miner railroad phase. And then we keep playing until all the miners have floated and all the players consecutively pass. At that point, the game enters train phase 2 with the first real operating round. The concession railroad phase. Each player gets a chance, based on their concessions, in order to do one of the following, and they must do one of them. It says may here, but you must do a concession if you have it. And you must do it in order. You can float a miner that you own. You can float a regional company, which involves paying for the stocks for the presidency of it. And you set the par value. If you have no miner and you have enough money to buy a regional, you must float it. And then finally, you can par a regional. If you don't have enough money to float a regional, and you can't float a miner with your concession, you must select a regional, set its par value, and put its presidency in the open market. And this makes it available for someone else to buy it. One of its markets will be on the top line of the leftmost open space on the regional Okay, so it'll get its order placed here, basically. And the first one to float gets the first space, the second one gets the second space. Where you want them, that's hard to tell, but the game suggests you do want them going early. You'll have the best chance of getting a 3 train that way. Okay, once all the concessions have been exercised, and note that there's, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 miners. So not all of the miners are going to float at this point. Once all of the concessions have been exercised, now you go to the regional miner railroad phase. Now this may continue, this will start in the stock round, it may continue going, and you may enter operating rounds. Now this is weird because phase 2 starts with the first operating round where the trains are available, but they aren't available in train phase 1, so it's kind of like there's an overlap between the two here. So during the stock rounds in the regional and miner railroad phase, you can do the following. You can float a miner you own, same as when you had a concession. You just take your turn then to do it, which means that, you know, maybe it's not that big a deal to float your miner early, you know, with a concession, because you'll get chances to do it over here. You can float a regional, same way. You can purchase a PARD Regional's presidency out of the open market and float it. Or you can remove an unfloated, unPARD regional from the game. And it'll just disappear and will never be available. However, you have a limitation there. First of all, you can't reduce the total number of regionals to 18, which is to say only 6 will be removed. And each of the 6 removed is going to be from a different track right zone. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 track right zones. So you can't denude an area. However, it is possible, although probably unlikely, that someone will leave one track right zone completely unfloated. And we'll get to that in a moment. So it is possible that, like, you know, Spain could end up with none of their regional railroads starting, in which case there would be no regionals in Spain for the game. Okay. But one way of getting them out is to just make the decision, we don't want that one. Not sure how much value there is to that. If you're operating in that area, you might want both of them. If you're not operating in the area, what do you care? Why would you take an action doing that? Well, you have to take an action. Well, maybe. You're allowed, not quite, you're allowed to trade with another player. I think that takes your action there. And that is, only happens at this point. You can buy and sell, I think, unfloated miners, privates, whatever. If you just find that you don't have quite the collection of rail assets that you want it, you can work it out with someone else. Or you can pass. But you can't pass if you have an unfloated miner. Okay. You cannot buy the secondary 25% shares of the regionals. You can't float majors. You can't. A railroad will not be allowed to purchase a level 3 train, and railroads can't buy trains from each other. Now, this regional miner railroad phase will end immediately once all 12 miners and 18 of the regionals have floated. All 12 miners should float in the first stock round. I don't see a way around that. But the regionals, there may not be the cash for it. Any of the unfloated regionals that are left after the 18, there should be 6 total, but some of them may have been removed already, will be removed from the game at this point. There will be 18 of them. There's an option or a variant which allows you, throws more money and trains into the game. That's why they're there, or one of the reasons for the money. And it keeps all 24 in the game. I chose to play this one. I think it has more strategic options to it, and in terms of, you know, hey, which area is going to not get developed as much, what miners are going to get left, or what regional railroads are going to get left out. And it should also be a shorter game. Okay. And that's the point where, for example, if nobody's taken a Spanish railroad and nobody floated one of them, and we're down to 6 unfloated railroads, well, all 3 Spanish disappear along with the other 3 railroads there. Now we enter the major part of the game. And the whole game follows this except for one brief swap when we hit the formation and consolidation phase. And that's just an interlude in the major railroad phase. That is where we'll be doing kind of normal 18XX type activities. All the shares of the regionals are available. Majors are allowed to float. Level 3 trains can be purchased, but not during the first operating round of the game, even if it's switched into the major railroad phase at this point. They're allowed to be purchased even if there are remaining level 2 trains that are reserved by newly floated miners and regionals. We'll talk about reserved trains in a moment. Well, more than a moment. Basically what happens is that each miner and regional is guaranteed one of those 2+2 trains. They must buy it. No one else can buy it. And if they can't meet the funding requirements for it, they can cause what's called a first turn insolvency, which I think is the only normal bankruptcy in the game. But we'll see forced train purchases if they do something else going on. All right. At any time during the initial stock round, hey, the first time we've worded this, each player is allowed to designate one regional secondary 25% share as reserved. This regional secondary shares may not be purchased by any other player until the beginning of the second stock round. Now, there doesn't seem to be a limit to which railroad you do this to, so I don't know what happens if 2 people jump in at once to try to reserve something. We'll see. The designation may be made at any time, including when another player is attempting to purchase the first of the secondary shares of the regional. Once the secondary share has been purchased, the other one can't be reserved. The player attempting to make the blocked purchase does not forfeit their stock action. They can choose something else. If the regional expands into a major before the beginning of the first operating round, the reserve status is canceled and the major shares are now available for purchase by any player. Once reserve status is declared, the player may not rescind the decision or shift it to another regional. I think the intention behind this is so that you can get 75% of a regional that you're planning on making work well. But I'm not entirely sure. It sounds, the way it's written, it sounds like you can use it to reserve a share to prevent someone from getting to 75%. Okay. And since it's something that's outside the turn order, which I'm not used to in an XX game, you're basically able to call out and say, yeah, I'm doing that. And I don't know, if 2 people want to do it, maybe they rock, paper, scissors or something. Okay. The special railroad formation and consolidation period. Oh, no. This is not that special status. Okay. This is actually forming a railroad, floating it, or whatever. Miners will float as a player has to own it from the opening packet. They select one of the track right chits during a stock round when they're probably the first stock round. Declare the home city of the miner within that track right zone, and the table's listed here of where these are. And they place the miner's token in a city to indicate where they're based. If the city is in a hex that has land in more than one track right zone, it's based on where the border cuts. For example, this is in this zone, not over in Russia, even though there's a slice of Russia there for no reason except, I don't know, to make the jagged lines look better, a little better. Okay, there are 2 track right chits for each zone, but for each of the asterisk zones, 4 of the zones have an asterisk. When the 4th of those 6 chits is selected, the remaining track rights chits for these zones are removed from play. Now note there are none in the Balkans, Greece, and the Ottoman Empire. You can't start a miner in these areas, which is why the map's here, or the rules are here. I don't know where the rules are going to go when I'm playing. Okay. At this point, the miner has to pay a cost for its home token listed on the track rights chit. The miner's operating order marker is placed over there in the leftmost space. The home token can be placed in any city with an available token position within the track rights boundary. As long as that city is not the home of a regional, but if a regional's been removed from play already, it doesn't count for that. The city doesn't already have another miner on it, token on it. The city is not a metropolis. Okay. Metropolises are these M's. Where do we have one? Moscow's a metropolis, just as an example. Paris is not. Paris is a P. I don't remember where all the metropolises are. Maybe we need to look that up. I think they were the M's, but the largest cities have a tractile. Birmingham, Madrid, and Vienna are the metropolises. Well, that's not Moscow. So, Birmingham, Madrid, and Vienna, which seems like a weird set of choices to be called metropolises. The grand cities have Y's. That's these. I honestly think that, yeah, okay. All these cities with a letter are something. So Birmingham, Madrid, and Vienna share a set of tiles. These are the metropolises: London, Berlin, the 3, St. Petersburg, Naples, Constantinople, and Paris. Not Moscow. I'm not sure what Moscow's M is. We can see maybe it counts as a metropolis even though it's a red city. Yeah, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Off-board locations that have dots in them. What is going on with that? Well, we'll see why, but okay. So grand cities and red zones that are not metropolises are legal selections for a miner's home token. Which means what? I don't know. The grand cities are the Y's, but most of them have a regional in them, I think. Here's one that doesn't. Okay, and some of them would have their regional removed. For floating a regional, you have to do the following. You select an unfloated regional, take the regional's charter, presidential certificate, and the 2 secondary certificates, and the markers that were set aside during game setup. You set the par value by placing one of the large markers on one of these regional pars. The other marker will be placed on the leftmost space of the regional miner operating chart. Now, this is interesting because these guys do have sort of a stock value. They pay a certain value, but it's not really. They have a par value, which is going to shift over to the major railroad par value. They're going to operate based on the same track as the miners are. And you could, you know, there's nothing to guarantee that the miners go before the regionals or anything like that. They kind of get mushed together. You pay cash into the regional's treasury equal to twice the chosen par value, and you get the presidency certificate, which is double share. The other two certificates go into the company thing. They say the treasury, I guess, here. Right? Yeah. I've got a word for these, and it's been eluding me today. The regional is going to have to pay its home token cost to the bank. And then one of the two tokens is left on the map, or is placed on the map, on the regional's home city. The other one charter is the word I want. The other one goes on the company charter on the $20 space, and that second token will be $20 to buy. The first token ranges from 10 to 40, depending on what region you're in. Obviously, there's economic advantages. There's richer areas in England or whatever. All right. Let's keep going a little bit longer, but I have to swap batteries. Akin to 18EU, majors can only be floated by turning a regional into them. The president of the regional, or another player who owns both the secondary shares of a regional, can declare they're floating it into a major. And they do the following steps. First, if they're the current president, they can purchase a share at this point, at the par value. Now, note something. The par value of that share is going to go up once they turn into a major, and that's an important point to understand at this, because you have a decision here. Then the regional expands. It'll operate as a major for the rest of the game. People will be able to purchase and sell shares of the major according to normal stock market rules. The par value marker is moved to the major's letter par value. So for example, say the Grand Orient was a railway, I would move the par value over here to indicate, hey, the price has gone up. And you get less, but you get stock value now. The regional's operating order marker is taken from here and moved up into the regular stock market on the par space that it would be on. The other 6 shares and 6 tokens, which are collected down here, are going to be, and we use these on the stock market and on the par chart, are going to be moved to the company charter over here. Because now you're creating a corporation out of it. Now at this point you're allowed to sell any shares of any railroad you own within normal stock sale restrictions. And then if you have not purchased a share back in step 1, now that you've been able to raise capital, you can purchase 1 share of the major from its treasury. If you were not the president of the company, if you were floating the corporation with 225% shares, but without the presidency, you must do this in order to, because you have to be able to take the presidency after floating. So, if you float your own regional into a major, you're able to get this cheaper price. But that may or may not be the big bonus, because you're putting the par value into the corporate treasury. All right. Now, one more way of forming a company, which is turning forming a national corporation. Nationals can only be formed the beginning of train phases 4, 6, and 8. Immediately when trains rust, you're allowed to turn the corporations or the companies into nationals. And the train that caused the new train phase to begin is the first person who gets to turn one company in. And you go around in order until everybody's turned in as many as they need to. You place in the bank all the cash in the treasury of the major that's forming the national. It's only out of majors? Yeah, it's only out of majors. I thought you could do this out of regionals, but well, good reason not to keep your regionals, huh? Place in the open market all the certificates in the major's treasury, i.e. anything from the initial offering, but you're allowed to buy and sell stuff from your treasury. Kind of like 1870, but not quite. And any Pullman it owns is going to be discarded back to the train pool. Now, this is because every national corporation is considered to have a Pullman of its own. It said Belgium, it's the Belgian Railway. I wanted to make sure. Yeah, it's just the name of the train type. Okay. You flip the charter over, the assets go to, you remove from play all other, let's go back to where we are. You remove from play all the major's tokens that are on the map. What? Yep, nationals don't need tokens, it turns out. You abandon any miners that have merged with the major. They go into the bank pool and they can now be bought by by corporations. I don't know if players can buy them. I don't think so. Remove from play any other assets on the major charter except for trains. This includes any track rights, port authorities, Orient Express markers, and private markers that are placed there. However, the Swift Metropolitan line, its special 2+2 train that it gets to keep, is allowed to stay there unless the train limit is exceeded. The marker's removed, the train remains. You flip the charter over and move the remaining assets to the new side. A newly formed national retains all the trains, including rusted trains. All shares remain in the player's hands, and the share value marker of the major stays exactly where it was as the new national. One more rule on abandoning miners. You can abandon a miner during the course of the game. This can happen when a national forms. If a miner is merged into a national, the miner then gets abandoned immediately. Or if a player is unable to merge the miner during the consolidation railroad phase, which is when all the miners kind of clear out. A miner is abandoned by completing all these steps. The miner's charter is placed in the open market. Unless the miner is a subsidiary of a major that is at the moment converting to a national, all of its trains go into the open market. Otherwise, well, its trains are already kind of on the national at that point. All of the miner's tokens are removed from the map. Okay. Abandoned miners' tokens are gone for the rest of the game. The D miners' tokens and L miners' marker are placed with their charter. These have special significance. D has these, L has this. They just have some special abilities there. The M miner's Pullman goes with its charter and cannot be bought by another railroad, although any other Pullmans on that are available for purchase. The cash in the miner's treasury is placed in the bank. The track rights chip, though, remains with the miner's charter. In case a major buys it, it can use the track rights. And a player can't buy an abandoned miner themselves, but a major can purchase an abandoned miner, and only during buy or sell shares step of its operating round. All right, I think this is a good point to load this one up. As you can see, we're about halfway through the rules, so there's going to be another hour-long video at least on this. Let's go.